I wonder how I can I gotta talk to Oya about how.
You know we're live, right?
Oh, hi. Howdy, everyone. My name is Ryan Nicodemus.
I'm Joshua Fields Wilbur, and together we are the Minimalists. Welcome to another live stream. This is live stream number 7. It's Ask the Minimalists Anything. We've got your questions right here. So thank you first off to all of our Patreon folks who are supporting us. We're actually here in Los Angeles. We have a new studio space that we're working on building out.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're not at our objective yet, and we can't afford to do the filmmaking side of things yet, but we are getting closer. So tell your friends, family, pets, everyone who can help us out. No, we really do appreciate your help.
Yeah, no, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
And so we're not going to be answering questions through the live stream today because you already submitted your questions beforehand, and what happened was we had them upvoted. So you all upvoted them, and these are some of the most popular questions that we got. So obviously we can't answer all of the questions, but we're going to get to the most popular ones here today. And also Podcast Sean, who's sitting on the other side of the room, he's going to put this out as an audio podcast for the private podcast that we put out on Patreon as well. So you can check that out. By the way, most of you should know this by now. If you don't, I get questions about it occasionally. You can listen to all of our private podcasts on your normal podcast player on your phone. You just copy the link that is in the post. It's at the bottom of every single post on the Minimalist Private Podcast on Patreon. You just copy that link, put it right into your Apple Podcast or Overcast or wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can listen to it right there. All right.
Yeah, man. These are good. You know, I really like this, the upvoting. The way we have it laid out, how we pick the questions.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't read all the questions, but the ones that got upvoted, man, they're really, really awesome questions, man.
Yeah, we got some good questions today. And so what that tells us is that other people have the same questions as well.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and dive in here. We're going to be respectful of your time. We've got a half hour, so let's do this. Miranda asks, I often hear you guys talk about leverage. I don't fully understand what that is. Would you please explain leverage a bit more for me?
Leverage,
yes.
like with a fulcrum type.
Well, that's the metaphor, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So if you have to change your the literal sense, like if you have to change your tire on the side of the road, the reason that you use that big, when you have like a jack, you have like the big long
arm or whatever you want to call it.
It's like a little tiny pole that you just use to jack it up. That makes it much easier because you have the leverage. It requires more sort of rotations, but it's the same with any other task that we're trying to accomplish in our life, not just the things that need literal physical leverage, but quite often when you talk about leverage, it's the metaphorical sense.
Right. So leverage, the first thing I think about when I think of metaphorical leverage, I don't know why I'm going to laugh when I say metaphorical leverage. When I think about that, I think about like a pain versus pleasure scenario. So for me, like with going to the gym, for example, I did not go to the gym this morning. Mariah and we have planned to go later in the afternoon to make sure that we get there today. And the leverage that I'm going to use is I'm going to think to myself, like, Ryan, when you get to the gym, man, you're really going to feel good. And after that workout, you're gonna feel exhilarated. And if you don't go, I'm going to think about the pain. I'm going to think about, man, if I don't go, I'm really going to regret it. I'm going to feel like I didn't do anything today. And then I associate all the discomfort. And what I'm doing is I'm using the pleasure of going to the gym as leverage to motivate myself to get there. And I'm using the discomfort, the pain of not going to the gym to also help motivate myself to get there. What do you use leverage for most? Because that's the pleasure. Pain is by far where I use it the most.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying there is pain is often good leverage. You also hear people refer to it as the carrot and the stick in order to stay motivated.
Yeah.
Sometimes the carrot, which is the pleasure, to get you to the other side, you're chasing that carrot. That's enough leverage. Quite often, that's not enough leverage. And so what we often do is we say, okay, if I don't do this, then I'm going to feel pain.
Right.
And whether that's going to the gym or any other thing that you want to do, the reason that we don't do the things we want to do, I want to sit down and write this blog post, or I want to read this book, is we don't feel compelled enough to do that. And so we have to find either the pleasure side, oh, what am I going to get out of this experience, or the pain side. What kind of pain am I going to feel if I don't do this, and if I don't do it in a more effective time frame? And the other thing that gives me leverage is setting up my day with some small victories, right? And so instead of just waking up and turning on the TV, I feel like a total bum if I were to do that, right? And so if I really want to watch a movie or something, I'll try to schedule it. And in order to actually fulfill that schedule, I need to be able to have these little sort of victories throughout the day, and then I will feel good about sort of vegging out for an hour or two in the evening. So leverage, it has to do with compelling ourselves, finding an external way or even an internal motivation to compel ourselves to complete something that maybe is difficult for us to complete.
Yeah, another form of leverage would be like an accountability partner. You can use someone, a friend, family member, to help you to stay accountable, to help hold you accountable. I won't ramble on about that because I know we have a few more questions in a limited amount of time. But anytime that you have an opportunity to use leverage like this in your life to do what you want to do, to take action, that's really what Josh and I are talking about when we talk about using leverage.
Janelle asks, hi Josh and Ryan, I live in Michigan where we currently have over 2 feet of snow. Our power has gone out in the past, which means we have no heat or water. I like to keep a good amount of food and water, an emergency radio, propane heater, extra blankets, etc. for our family. What are your thoughts about being prepared for this kind of, quote, just in case situation that can and does happen?
Man, I wish you wouldn't have held on to that stuff, Josh.
You're a fake minimalist.
How pointless.
No, and so I actually think you accidentally, Janelle, contradicted yourself here when you said, what are your thoughts about being prepared for this just in case situation that does happen? Well, if it does happen and you're certain it's going to happen, it's not just in case. I buy toilet paper, right? Because I know that I'm going to need to use it. It's not just in case, it's just for when. Now here's the thing. If I'm in California and I'm holding on to snow tires just for when I need them, well, that's a problem, right? In fact, I'm in the process of selling my...
Unless you're in Northern California.
That's true. If I'm here in Los Angeles and I have
you don't need snow tires.
Exactly. Because it's just in case. That would be just in case for me. But it is, if we're living in Montana, that's just for when. You know the snow is coming no matter what. And it sounds to me like, Janelle, that there is a period of time, maybe it's every few years or whatever. These things won't fit into your 90-90 rule or whatever. But it's not just in case. These are just for when items. Here's the one question I ask myself, though, when I'm preparing for any of these events. What am I actually preparing for? That's the problem. I think we're not asking that question very often. I'm going to get these items to prepare for a storm or a flood or whatever, but we don't know specifically what I'm preparing for. Are you preparing for a week, a month, a year? What's the time frame? And then quite often, what I've realized when I start going through that exercise is I can't prepare for everything. There are certain things that I do need to prepare for, and it's important to prepare for those, but we're never going to be prepared for everything. So many of those things are just in case, but occasionally if you live somewhere where the power is going to go out, or you know that you need these backup items, those are just for when items.
Yeah, when you've got weather that is going to change on a dime and going to, has a chance of stranding you. I know in Montana, in my car, I've got a blanket, some water, flashlight, I've got a spare tire, I've got a jack in my car. All of these things that I have, they are for just for when scenarios. So yeah, figure out what it is you are preparing for, and then figure out exactly what you need to prepare for that situation. Because you're right, Josh, you don't want to just build a bomb shelter and throw as much crap in there as you can. Right. You really want to be deliberate with, okay, if someone wants to build a bomb shelter, great. Like, I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to build a bomb shelter, but I'm not going to knock anyone who does. But how long are you planning on staying in that bomb shelter? Is it 1 month, 6 months? But just building a bomb shelter and filling it with as much stuff as possible, it's probably not the best plan.
Yeah, and when we start preparing for everything, we realize that we're prepared for nothing.
Right.
And because the more you try to prepare for something like that, like there's always going to be the next worst scenario. Well, I've got my bomb shelter. What happens when the zombies arrive?
Oh yeah, I mean, what happens with the fallout? I mean,
right.
I mean, if, as soon as you step foot out that bomb shelter, like in a nuclear disaster, for example, it's so there isn't long enough you could prepare for. Maybe there's a chance of rescue or something, but then that's to my point though. Maybe a month, 6 months, whatever it is, but just cramming it full of stuff, trying to prepare for everything. It'll turn you into a hoarder really quick.
Here's another rule I go by: is if it feels like excess to me, it's probably excess. Mm-hmm. And so, what am I preparing for? And for me, I tend to prepare for a week, so we'll keep enough water. And here's the thing, though, like I don't even keep extra food and stuff because I know that like I'm not. You can just eat your own to death. Actually, I keep some stuff for Ella, so I know some stuff that she could eat. But like, the truth is that I'm not. If it's going to be more than a week, I need to get out of there.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, and then if I lived in a population, or if I was on a big, huge lot of land, and my city had very low population, I might be prepared a little bit differently than living here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, for sure. All right, our next question is on my phone. Manuel asks, for someone still trying to identify their 5 main values, do you believe the 5 that you list it's in our book, Minimalism, Live a Meaningful Life. That's what he's talking about here. You think those 5 values are a, quote, universal 5 values for everyone? If not, what were some of the other values that almost made your top 5, and what advice would you give someone trying to identify their 5 main values?
So real quick, for the people who don't know what the 5 are, Josh and I, we wrote about that in the book. Josh mentioned Minimalism, Live a Meaningful Life. It's health, relationships, cultivating passion, growth, and contribution. For Josh and I, we have discovered that those are the things that really drive us. When I feel like I am falling a little bit behind, if I'm feeling a little stressed, if I'm just feeling a little bit off, I look at those 5 areas and think of them as buckets. And I kind of look at which bucket is the least full. And that's where I really try to put my attention. So maybe I look at my relationships and I'm like, yeah, you know what? I haven't talked to my mom in a while. And it's been a while since I called my dad. I really should probably check in on them. And, this isn't a magic bullet or a magic formula that is like the answer to happiness. But what it does is it helps me to live a more meaningful life. So some of the stuff that I think of that isn't on that list, that I know other people have put on there. One that definitely stands out would be security.
Okay.
That is something I know a lot of mentoring students that I have, when I have them go through this exercise and uncover their values, security will come up on a lot of those. And for me, security is important, right? Like I got to know that this ceiling is not going to fall on my head, and that this floor is going to hold. And I got to, I want to make sure that I have enough retirement savings in my account. But at the end of the day, I also like uncertainty too.
Yeah, the opposite of security.
Right. I like the variety. I like the,
So do I think those are the 5 main values, that those are universal? Yes, I think they're universal. I mean, can you tell me anyone who wouldn't benefit from improving their health or their relationships or being more passionate about something? Someone who's growing more, they're not going to benefit from that, or someone who is increasing their ability to contribute to the world. Those are all universal, I think. They're going to help anyone. And so I like to look at the values as 4 different buckets. That one is, or maybe 4 different kinds of values is a better way to put it, right? So those, for me, are the foundational values. So if you use the metaphor of building a house, you have to have a sturdy foundation, because your other values are built on top of that. And if you're building on sand, well, then you're just going to have a house that collapses. And so I think that it starts with those 5 values. The one thing that I would maybe swap out, if passion doesn't work for you, is the right word, is the word creativity. So I think that they can be interchangeable. In fact, I often use that word creativity to talk about it's the less sexy side of passion, right?
Right.
Because
passion is also kind of an overused word, right?
Yeah.
It's like every time I hear the word, like I'm careful how I use it, especially like when I say instead of pursuing passion, I will specifically say cultivating passion. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, and so creativity and passion can go hand in hand. So yeah, I think you can sub those out. Sure. But I've got my list here. So once you build that foundation, then you have a framework for your house. So the down to the studs, right? And I would call those your core values. So we started with foundational values, those 5. I think those are universal. And then for me, some of my core values are, I'll just go through these real quick. Autonomy, certainty. So you just talked about certainty, right? Character. So like living congruent with your own values. That's part of my core values. Communication, compassion, curiosity, freedom, free speech, grace, gratitude, humility, humor, insight, integrity. And I have just like a little one sentence explanation for each one of these is. But you have to write it down, like not what a dictionary definition is, but I write down what is, for example, like what does intimacy mean to me? It means a shared close connection with others, right? Leadership. The ability to inspire other people and move them in the same direction. Mobility, morality, quality, respect, restraint, sexuality, significance, solitude, trust, truth, variety, wisdom. So I probably have, 20, 25 core values there. That's the framework that you build the house on. And the next, minor values. This is what makes the house beautiful, or makes your life more interesting. And this is sort of the facade on the house, the brick outside, what makes life worth living quite often once we've built the, now obviously you wouldn't just take a bunch of bricks and throw them on a pile of sand and say you have a house, right? You have to have that framework and the foundation there first. But then this is what makes life interesting for me. So aesthetics, coffee, concerts, entertainment, environment, guitar, music, reading, social media, style, teaching, technology, tools, like useful possessions. So those are some of the things that just make life more interesting. They're not absolute needs, but it's what makes the house more ornate. It makes your life your life. And then here's the last area: imaginary values. We often pretend that something's important to us, right? For me, one thing I have here is chocolate, because I am a chocoholic. Efficiency, that's another thing. So these imaginary values, these are the things we often spend way too much time on. Yeah. In fact, right now I'd move social media into that bucket, And so sometimes they change over time. They'll move from one area to the other, where you realize, like, oh, that's not a real value, that's a pretend value. And so these are often obstacles. They prevent us from reaching our real values because we're spending all this time on social media or gorging on chocolate, right? Efficiency was one for me, because for the longest time I've worked so hard to be efficient. You have to be efficient, right? But efficient in what, right? Like if I'm just checking my email all day, I might be an efficient email checker, but that doesn't create a meaningful life. Some other imaginary values for me here at the bottom: email, Instagram, productivity, scarcity. We often say, well, I gotta act quick because supplies are limited. Act now. And soon, in fact, I see it as the opposite now. As soon as someone tries to pressure me into making a decision, I will step back and go, okay, is this the right decision, or am I saying yes to this because I feel this scarcity that is encouraging me to act? So I think those are different types of values, and hopefully that will help you out. Let's see here. Some other questions we have, Ryan.
All right.
Katrina says, I'm getting married in April. How do I ask for no gifts on the invitation? I'm getting scared of all the items we might find on our doorstep.
Well, if I was to ever get married again, I would probably have fun with it, man. Yeah. Like on the RSVP, I would this is my style. I'm not recommending this. I'm just, this is what I would do. Right. But feel free to run with this idea. But I would take the RSVP and I would put something at the bottom like, please no gifts. Seriously, no gifts. Like if you bring a gift, it will be left and no one will use the gift. You will have to take the gift home with you. Like, something really absurd. Well, it reminds me of, remember our friend Leo Babauta, he, on his website, he zenhabits.net, he has a little thing on his contact page that said, like, Zen Habits is not accepting guest posts, and any requests for them will be met with a karate chop to the throat. Right. Like that, clearly joking. Exactly. And you could do the same thing. Like, hey, if you bring a gift to our wedding, we're going to karate chop you in the throat. Right. Like, or the other thing I think you could do is you can, instead of saying, no, I don't want gifts, tell people what you do want. Set up your own registry page. So whatever you and your spouse's name is. So Katrina and Mike, I'm assuming it's Mike. His name has to be Mike.
It's probably just, you could do like katrinaandmichael.com or something like that. And then you can have and on the invitation, you just say, a gift registry at katrinaandmichael.com. And then of course, on there, you could just list experiences that you want.
Yeah.
And on that page, you could say,
a great idea, man.
These are the only things we want. Don't get us anything else, because your gifts will be met with a karate chop to the throat.
Yeah. And also, you can put something very simple on there, like, please don't bring a present. Your presence is the best present. Otherwise, it'll be met with a karate chop to the throat. So, you have a couple different approaches. You could do, be a little satirical with it, or
you can hire a person dressed up like a ninja and have them stand at the gift table.
Why is there a gift table?
Just with the ninja in front of it. And there better be no gifts on that gift table.
But yeah, I think what we're really getting here is setting the right expectation in a way that's appropriate for your wedding. If comedy is not your route, obviously Josh and I, we like to interject as much comedy as possible. There certainly is a very heartfelt, serious way that you can communicate that message on the RSVP to all of your guests.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, next question is from Rachel. She says, I have been able to say goodbye to relationships that aren't adding value. How do you appreciate and grow relationships within your primary circle when the other people are not willing to talk openly, make changes on both sides, and simply have fun? Ryan, how do you change the people around you?
I don't ever try to change anyone around me. People hate change. I hate change. It's uncomfortable. I try to get as comfortable as possible with it. But still, I think change is uncomfortable for everyone. When someone tries to change me, when they try to force change on me, that's even worse. So I don't ever try to force change on someone. I'm not going to say it, dude. It's your line.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think that if the people in your primary circle aren't making your life better and are dragging you down, you need new people in your primary circle.
So what would you say? You'd say you couldn't change the people around you,
but you could kill the people in your primary circle.
Like metaphorically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Out of your life.
Just kill them metaphorically. So no, here's the thing. I think that sometimes think back to when we were teenagers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your inner circle, the 5 primary relationships in your life, are radically different from the 5 primary relationships now.
Oh, absolutely.
It didn't happen overnight. You didn't say, all right, well, it's not a basketball team. Well, I need a new starting lineup.
Right.
But you need a new starting lineup. And that's the thing. It doesn't mean, and so effectively what you're doing is benching the other people. You're putting them in the secondary tier or the third, the tertiary tier, which means they get very little playtime, or they're just not on the team at all anymore. And sometimes you have to love people from a distance, and they're maybe on the tertiary, and you'll be there if you need them. But if it's going to take you days or weeks to recover from a conversation, I've had people like that in my life where I have a conversation with them, all of a sudden I have a shitty day for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And that type of person is dragging me down constantly. I can have that conversation with them, but and some people you can't even have the conversation with, and you'll know who you can and can't have a conversation with. Doesn't mean the ones you do have a conversation with is going to be easy. It's still hard. If I have to have a difficult conversation with Ryan, or if he has to have a difficult conversation with me, we do that from time to time. It's not an easy conversation, but we also know that we can respect each other's point of view, and we can have those conversations without getting offended. But some people are going to be so offended there's nothing that you can do other than just distance yourself. And the best way to distance yourself is to just actively be less active with them, like intentionally, like putting a stop to constantly reaching out or needing to be around those people. And then I think what we need to do is put new people. It's not just get rid of those people and be a hermit somewhere. We have to put new people in that inner circle.
Yeah. Like you said, man, it's not starting a lineup. You're not going to start listing out, a whole new team of people. But if you've got a primary circle of people that you want to be friends with and hang out with, and they're not treating the relationship like you want them to, and you've gone out of your way to express to them how you want them to treat the relationship, and they still insist on not doing that, well, that to me, that would drive me crazy, because that would sounds like a relationship where I would be giving everything, and I would be putting into that what do you call it, the bank, the
us box.
The us box.
Yeah.
If I'm the only one throwing my time and attention into the us box, that's going to feel like a very one-sided relationship. It's not going to feel very good, and that's sounds like where you're at, and that's why you're asking this question. So. I would encourage you to maybe find someone else to bring into your primary circle. Just start with one.
And let's talk about how you can do that real quick.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that you can go to well, first off, there's minimalists.org. There are 100 cities there. There are a lot of regular meetups right there. You can find some open-minded people, but there's also cool places like meetup.com, where you can find groups of people meeting with all different types of all different types of topics. So you could literally go to meetup.com and search knitting, and I guarantee you're going to find like a knitting group. You can go in there and search yoga or meditation or simplicity, and you're going to find stuff there. So that's what I always encourage people to do. What else do you think?
Well, I think when you do that, so I think that's a great tip to find some sort of group that's going to get you outside of your comfort zone. You're going to be forced to meet some new people with similar interests. Mm-hmm. Interests are a weak way to build a relationship long term, but it's a great way to get an in with someone. Because someone has the same interests doesn't mean they have the same values. So you probably shouldn't marry someone just because they have the same interests as you if they have radically different values or beliefs, right? And so the beliefs are okay, but having different values from each other, or being with friends or lovers with someone who has different values from you, that's a recipe for long-term disaster.
Yeah, or at least a long-term contention. Discontent or contention. Yeah. I mean, if I was dating someone who we had a lot of similar interests, but they were a hoarder, and I'm just going to the extreme here. Like if Mariah was a hoarder, I probably would not have continued that relationship, because I want to be able to see my my living room floor. Now, if I did decide to go into it because we did have the same interests, well, then there's always going to be that contention of me kind of resenting the fact that she's a hoarder. And then I'm going to be like getting on her all the time about why is she a hoarder and why does she pick up her stuff? And then she's going to look at me and say, I was like this when you decided to move in with me. So yeah.
And I think the other thing to do when we're with those new meetup groups or just around a new person, instead of trying to figure out that us box right away, figure out what you can give to the us box first. Before you try to take anything, how can I add value to this relationship? Or basically, how can I add value to this other person's life? And that will set up a dynamic where you are clearly a person who is caring and compassionate and is able to contribute. And then the other people, quite often, when they see that role model of contribution, they want to contribute as well. And you can pretty quickly figure out if you have similar values through that process. All right, I think we have time for one more, maybe. Let's try to make this count here. All right. Adam says, other than decluttering, oh wait, I'm sorry, it's Gabrielle. Nope, it's Gabrielle.
Sorry, Adam.
Adam, next time, brother.
As long as it's upvoted.
Yeah, Gabrielle's was upvoted here. This year has been really hard for me financially. Separation plus a burnout. How do I get back on my feet and continue on my debt-paying journey? Sorry, it's been a difficult year for you. The one thing I would say is it sounds like a few things are conflated here. I don't know if they're actually conflated in your head or just in your question here. You said it's been really hard for you financially, but it doesn't sound like to me that's what the difficult part is. You said you had a separation plus a burnout. Those are the difficult things, and now where that's manifesting is in the finances. So it sounds like the underlying problem is not the financial problem.
Totally agree.
Because I had a habit problem. So I was making really good money in the corporate world a decade ago. I was making $200,000 a year in Dayton, Ohio at age 27. And I had a problem with the way I spent that money. So I was in debt, massive amounts of debt, because I was spending more than I was earning. When I walked away from the corporate world that first year, 2011, I made $23,000 that year. And I can tell you that I was more financially secure that year than a few years prior to that, when I was making almost 10 times as much money. So I didn't really have a financial problem as much as I had a spending habit problem. And the real problem was underneath that, the burnout she was talking about, the separation. And often that makes us make bad decisions in other parts of our life. And so the question then is, how do I rebound from a separation, or how do I rebound from this burnout that I'm experiencing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it goes back. Yeah, it goes back to that leverage, man, that we were talking about earlier. It's like, what leverage can you find to get yourself back on track? So yes, you've gone through these difficult times, but where do you want to be? What is it that is really driving you crazy? Now, I agree, man. The financial part is probably not the biggest issue.
It's just an indicator.
It is an indicator. And it sounds like this is the one thing that might be standing out to her that she could act on.
Yes.
And what I will say is that if you do start to act on something that you know that you've been lacking on, that will automatically give you a little bit more confidence. It will make you feel better. So even if you do just focus on the financial thing, it's going to make you feel a little bit better. But that's for you to decide. You've got to decide what is going to add the most value to your life. But going back to finding the leverage, you've got to find the pain associated with not taking action, and you've got to find the pleasure with taking action. That is what I always do to help myself get back on track. When Josh and I are on tour and we're on the road, and I always go back to working out, because like it is something that I have been able to incorporate in my life that I thought I'd never would ever feel this way about it, and have the leverage to follow through with it. But we'll be on the road, and I don't get to work out on a regular I don't get to have a regular workout routine as I would like to when we're on the road. So when I get back to LA, I actually look forward to it, and I take that joy that I have of looking forward to the routine, and I focus on that. And then I get Mariah excited about it. And then I just start to take that and just use that as much as I can for leverage to motivate me to get back into it.
That's great, man. I think to sum that up in a sentence I was thinking about this morning is sometimes the reward is in the struggle.
Yeah.
And like, so I've been, because I've finally fixed my back mostly. I've been lifting weights again for the first time in 5 years. Wow. I haven't been allowed to. And it's a struggle. Like, I went down to the gym this morning and like just pushed it really hard. That's where the reward is. Like afterward, that feeling of accomplishment, that reward, and also it puts me in a totally different state. And so another thing I'll recommend for your debt is check out the Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey.
Yes.
It's a great book for getting out of debt, a great system there. And then also for budgeting, he has an app called Every Dollar. It's a free app. All right, y'all, we're out of time. So thank you so much for tuning in. Yeah. If you're catching this after the fact, we'll see you next time. Keep asking your questions. We'll keep answering them on our monthly live stream. Check out the private podcast as well. We got a bunch of really cool stuff coming for Patreon supporters. Some of our live events are going to go exclusively in the Patreon feed. We just did the Tampa one last week, and the Detroit one is coming out next week, only on Patreon. All right, y'all. Love people, use things. We'll see you next time.
See ya.